In real-life scenarios, our weapons show reliability and effectiveness. At the same time, the much-hyped Western weaponry has shown itself to be far from perfect. You can check for yourself at the exhibition of the weapons captured in Ukraine. Despite the comprehensive assistance of the West, the armed forces of Ukraine failed to achieve their results. An example of this is the publicized strategic counteroffensive. The skillful actions of the personnel of the Russian armed forces, their coherence, and the high level of training make it possible to respond flexibly to the implementation by Kyiv of the plans of their Western curators. Preliminary results of combat actions show that Ukraine's military resources are almost exhausted. Let's start with the last point. Is he talking about the soldiers being physically exhausted, or the supply of weaponry and ammunition being exhausted?
Both. He's talked about the logistics of this. Ukraine is running out of ammunition. They're running out of tanks. They're running out of infantry fighting vehicles. They're running out of artillery pieces. And they're also running out of men. And the men are also running out of the will to fight. And that's an important part of war. I mean, I would rather have a Marine with 30-year-old equipment who wants to be there, who's trained to be there, ready to be there, going up against somebody with brand new equipment who doesn't want to be there. I'll win that fight every day of the week. The Ukrainians have bad equipment, and their guys, for the most part, just don't want to be there. Their best troops that they have left, the strategic reserves that they were holding to the west of Kyiv, have now been committed to the Rabatino fight. Once they're dead, there's nothing left. I mean, there's a handful of motivated troops, but motivated troops can't cover a 1,000 kilometer front line. The vast majority of the troops are these territorials who have been, bonked on the side of the head and literally shanghaied into the front line with no training.
Is there, maybe there's more than one reason, is a reason why we have not given the Ukrainians first-rate equipment? Fear that the Russians will capture it and reverse engineer it and find out what we have?
I mean, that's what we'll say. We're afraid they'll find out the secrets. What we're really afraid of is that they'll find out that our best equipment's not that good, that our best equipment is easily defeated on the battlefield. And that's half the hype of NATO, is that we're NATO, we're big, we're bold, we've got this new equipment, we're sexy, we're better than you, we're better than your equipment. And what we don't want to become the reality is for the Russians to go, that stuff's garbage. This T-90 tank we have is 4 times better. We have nothing to fear. And now you've increased Russian confidence that much more, and you've deflated whatever advantage NATO could accrue by the myth of NATO technological superiority. The West no longer has technological superiority.
So the Guardian of London quotes unnamed sources in Kyiv saying or complaining that American F-16s are not going to arrive in 2023. That's consistent with what you said, Tony Schaefer said, Colonel McGregor said, Larry Johnson, all of our people who have expertise in this field. If the F-16s don't arrive until 2024, will there be a war going on? Will they be of any use to the Ukrainians? Will there be a Ukrainian government there?
Like I said, there's going to be an interesting moment sometime in late summer, early fall, when the current iteration of the Ukrainian military is strategically defeated on the battle, and we start to see the collapse of the Ukrainian line. This will open up the door for a political resolution. If the Ukrainian government's not prepared for that to bring a political end to this conflict, it's possible they will be able to extend this conflict into the spring. But in the spring, you're just going to get a repeat of what exists now. And the Russians aren't going to let up over the winter. They'll put the pedal to the metal. They'll put the pressure on the Ukrainians. The bottom line is, I don't think an F-16 is going to fly in anger over Ukrainian airspace. I don't think an F-16 is going to arrive on Ukrainian soil. I think this war will be over long before that. But if they do arrive, it'll be one of the shortest-lived combat experiences of an F-16 in the history of that fighter aircraft.
Secretary General Stoltenberg of NATO made a very interesting comment yesterday. We don't have the actual tape of it, but we have a full screen of him saying it, so I'll read it to you. And I'm going to ask you, is this a crack in the wall? I almost can't believe he's saying this. It is the Ukrainians and only the Ukrainians who can decide when there are conditions in place for negotiations and who can decide at the negotiating table what is an acceptable solution. You know, this from the mentality of, we'll give you all the equipment you need, you can beat the Russians, you're going to get Crimea back, no negotiations until the Russians leave eastern Ukraine and Crimea. Why is he saying this?
Well, one reason is that there was a conference in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, a few weeks back where 40 nations came together to discuss the conditions under which peace could be achieved in Ukraine. And the foundational starting point was a 10-point peace plan that Zelensky had put forward, which is totally unrealistic. The surrender of Russia, the turning over of Putin, the paying of reparations. And pretty much the entire world told Ukraine at that time, that ain't never going to happen. You're going to have to come up with something better. Just the other day, Stoltenberg's deputy, in a freewheeling discussion, said, maybe it's time the Ukrainians accept the fact that they're going to have to make territorial concessions to Russia, meaning whatever territory Russia has right now, Ukraine's going to have to give it to them. In exchange, NATO will bring Ukraine in and make it a NATO member. Ukraine immediately responded saying, we will never give anything up, and how dare you set this? And so this was Stoltenberg's way of trying to correct the record, but it's a very weak way of saying it, because it changes the fact that the reason why the deputy to Stoltenberg said what he said is that Ukraine has lost this war, and NATO now knows it. NATO knows there's nothing that can be done to reverse that outcome. So the best thing to do is for Ukraine to, eject from this downed aircraft before it hits the ground.
Do you suspect, just in your gut, Scott, that there's some back channel communications going on, maybe with 3 or 4 intermediaries, but somehow connecting dots between Moscow, Brussels, London, Washington, D.C., and Kyiv?
No, I think Russia's been kept totally out of this. I do believe there's back channel discussions taking place with Zelensky, trying to remind him of the reality of the situation, that this war will not go on forever. In fact, it won't go on for much longer. The West is exhausted, and there's not an infinite pool of equipment that Ukraine can draw from. And sooner or later, Zelensky is going to have to budge. But the West has also backed itself into a political corner where it can't be seen as telling Ukraine what to do. Zelensky is going to have to be the one who says we're willing to accept this territorial thing. And so I think that's what we saw with Stoltenberg's deputy. He was floating, one of those trial balloons out there saying, hey, what if you gave up the territory and we promised you a membership in NATO, forgetting that the whole reason why this war began is that Russia said Ukraine's never joining NATO. What part of, if Russia's winning the war, do you think Russia's going to go, oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead and join NATO? What the heck? No, this was never about territorial acquisition on the part of Russia.
Here's